This is an approach that we aim to significantly reduce or eliminate the greenhouse gas emissions so that we prevent global temperature from rising more than the 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial levels.
Welcome to the Stantec.io podcast, where we speak to our scientists, designers, engineers, and architects who are combining subject matter expertise with cutting-edge technology to develop digital solutions that can help solve the problems of today and tomorrow. My name's Dave Roberts.
And I'm Mike Arsenault. Building on our conversation in last month's episode on the transition to clean energy, this month we're continuing to focus on the green revolution with an episode centered around decarbonization. Many believe decarbonization is the key to cool a warming planet, and joining us to discuss how we get there is Ghina Annan.
Ghina is Stantec's decarbonization business lead, based in Ottawa, Ontario, in Canada. Welcome to the podcast, Ghina.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome, and I'm happy to be here.
Now, I'm really looking forward to this discussion, Ghina. And before we really dig in, let's start with a bit of a wider lens. Can you explain exactly what decarbonization is and why it's so important to the global fight against climate change?
Absolutely. So climate change is actually the greatest environmental challenge of our time. And just to explain that a bit, the global warming has been proven that it's due to human-generated greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere. And this is what we refer to as carbon emissions. And we understand and we see it on a daily basis that this has adverse environmental, biodiversity, social, and economic effects around the world. And if we don't do anything around the temperature will continue to rise. So an important metric here is that the building industry is responsible for 38%. To put it into perspective, it's around 14 gigatons of all energy-related greenhouse gas emission each year. So the built environment carbon impacts are mostly attributable to either operational or embodied carbon emissions or even user carbon impacts. So now to the question, what is decarbonization and why it's really important? Because only through decarbonization as a critical strategy, we can fight climate change. This is an approach that we aim to significantly reduce or eliminate the greenhouse gas emissions so that we prevent global temperature from rising more than the 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial levels. And this is really a goal that is set by many countries in the Paris Agreement. Now, what does that mean? Because this target is set by these countries, but we work closely with clients to help them transition away from the fossil fuels and adopt cleaner energy sources like the wind, like solar, like geothermal, and more. In the ideal scenario of reaching that would be net zero emissions by 2050. So this means any remaining emissions would need to be balanced by removing an equivalent amount of carbon dioxide or CO2 equivalent from the atmosphere. So we know and accept that there is no time to lose and that there is no silver bullet for all these projects. Reducing emissions as much as possible would really require a whole life carbon approach and have all players in the value chain. And maintaining a status quo will not really allow us to achieve the net zero targets. So the time for action is now and we need everyone on board.
So Ghina, what are the different types of decarbonization and what poses the biggest challenge for our clients and communities?
So the first one is operational carbon, and this is carbon coming from the energy and the water consumption in the day-to-day running of any building asset. It could be a building or it could be an infrastructure asset. The embodied carbon is coming from sourcing of the material, the manufacturing, the installing of the material and components that make up a building or an asset. And this actually includes the lifetime emissions from the maintenance, the repair, the replacement, and ultimately the demolition or destruction and the waste treatment and disposal. And finally, and this item is quite interesting because lately it has been integrated, the whole life carbon assessment, which is the user carbon from the activities of the users of the built asset. And that's outside of the use of energy and water used to operate the building. So, for example, the impact of commuting to the office building or the impact of vehicles using the road. And this really produces further user-related emissions. Now, to your question about the challenges, this is very important because throughout our project deliverables and our interaction with the clients and the various teams, we have competing interests. So the first challenge is that different stakeholders, they have divergent priorities and objectives. The second challenge is the communication gaps. We have to ensure that effective collaboration is only through clear communication channels. And finally, the third challenge is the data overload. This language and this requirement is all new to our clients and is all new out there. So the complexity of the data around embodied carbon can overwhelm stakeholders. What do we need to do is to implement structured communication plans to ensure that all parties are aligned and informed. We always simplify communication and share relatable examples that would highlight the positive outcome of reducing the carbon emissions. Again, this is the decade of action, and to prevent any catastrophic climate change impacts, all sectors might take action quickly.
Ghina, I'm curious if there's any difficulty with getting buy-in from some companies and organizations to these decarbonization efforts, because everyone wants a healthier, cleaner planet for everyone now and future generations in perpetuity for the human race to continue with that cleaner, greener planet. But for many companies and organizations, the economic bottom line is very important. So if these decarbonization efforts cost them more money or not getting the operational efficiencies that they're hoping for, so how do you kind of change hearts and minds when people are looking at this purely from an economic perspective?
Great question. So the key actions for that is, first of all, we carry out a whole life carbon assessment on all our projects using a consistent methodology and open source sharing of data. And then the second important thing is, speaking to costs, we conduct a life cycle cost assessment, because really looking at the upfront costs can be misleading when incorporating sustainability measures. So performing this assessment and assessing metrics like incremental net present value and marginal abatement costs can help make the business case. The third thing we do is we develop consistent and transparent carbon intensity data for our components and systems and the materials used, so that clients will be better aware of what works best for the project. And we try to set those clear targets for the project so that we would have a valid approach and have an approach that is really acceptable by all stakeholders, with a clear definition of a net zero building target or a specific target that takes into account the whole life cycle carbon. And then while we do all these steps, we make sure that we achieve wider collaboration and ensure that every single stakeholder is taking action throughout the whole process and phasing of the project.
And how does technology and digitization play a role in this decarbonization process, Ghina?
So the pressing issues of climate change, population growth, demographic shifts, urbanization, and resource scarcity necessitate that our clients evolve to endure and prosper in the years ahead. The technological revolution of this century has uncovered a wealth of data about our cities and their occupants. And while some sectors have started to capitalize on this data to innovate and cut costs, its use in urban planning and design really remains underexplored. So there's this growing curiosity about how digital technologies can shape tomorrow's urban landscape. Personally, I believe that digitalization is becoming a key driver in this transformation. It plays an essential role in decarbonizing various industries. At its heart, digitalization harnesses data and computational power to refine the production, distribution, and consumption of energy, resulting in a lot of important advantages. The first are the digital tools. What are they? They're basically smart meters and building management systems that enable precise monitoring and immediate adjustment, significantly curbing the energy waste. The second is the digital grids. Those incorporate and regulate the variable nature of renewable energies such as the wind, the solar, and this guarantees a consistent, dependable energy supply. The virtual power plants are innovative development that expedite decarbonizations. And these really form a cohesive network that combine the renewable sources, the storage solutions, and adjustable loads to enhance the energy efficiency and reduce emissions. We need to think building that autonomously modify the lighting, the heating, and the cooling based on occupancy, or transport system that integrate the public transit with electric vehicles, reducing the need for private cars. So digital tools like sensors and big data can also revolutionize the sustainable supply chain and optimize the logistics to decrease the emissions through smarter routing. However, to fully leverage digitalization potential, we must overcome certain obstacles. The most important thing, and I would love to address today, is the need to upgrade the existing infrastructure. This is really essential to exploit digital solution effectively. Investments are important to foster progress in areas such as internet access and more. And a strategic digital approach really could help us and enable the construction sector to achieve low carbon, resilient development that is prepared for climate change and economic expansion.
So what is the design impact on projects when prioritizing decarbonization?
I believe that everyone has a significant part to play in the transition to decarbonization, and this includes assisting clients and developers in establishing clear strategies at both the organizational and project levels, which are really essential to create net zero carbon buildings. Second, it's important to provide design teams with straightforward best practice guidelines to facilitate the achievement of the targets. And then third is understanding how governing bodies in our cities, communities anticipate to integrate decarbonization. This is through region-specific GHG reduction targets and implementation timelines. So narrowing the performance gap essentially hinges three fundamental aspects. First, setting achievable goals that reflect realistic expectation. Second, consistently monitoring performance to ensure ongoing adherence to these goals. And third, implementing systematic approach to minimize energy consumption relative to set targets. So for existing structures, for example, goal setting may involve the use of benchmark data or the development of a comprehensive simulation tool. In the case of new construction, the process begins at the pre-concept design stage. And early on, it's important to establish preliminary performance and energy use goals. And this is supported by detailed energy consumption modeling to guide the design. And during the construction and handover of new buildings, monitoring is important. We want to make sure that this is followed by thorough verification and commissioning. This ensures that the design that we have worked hard to put together is fully realized in the actual construction. Now, going back on the performance goals, and those again should be continually refined and integrated with the monitoring system, allowing for straightforward ongoing comparison. Our team currently they're working on developing a mapping tool that works to gather reduction targets on a local, provincial, and territorial and federal level. And why this is important? Because these targets are compared to help project teams determine the level of innovation required in design to align with the region's decarbonization timelines. And only using this information, we can not only educate our design teams, but our clients on the trends of the region they are building within.
Now, Ghina, you mentioned that you work on projects across the globe and working with many different clients and communities with different regulations and restrictions. So I'm curious, in your estimation, what do you think will be the toughest nut to crack, so to speak, in the global decarbonization movement?
So to reiterate on the previous thoughts here is basically prominent scientists have issued stark warnings. And this is basically, if we don't make radical changes soon, we could be facing a future where our planet can sustain only 0.5 to 1 billion people. So this climate and ecological crisis demands immediate action. It's imperative that our urban areas, communities, and especially our buildings achieve zero carbon emissions promptly. So the challenge lies in integrating sustainability into projects from the outset, even those that initially lack a sustainability component. Engaging a sustainability consultant from the early stages is crucial because once a design is finalized, we lose most opportunities for decarbonization. It's essential to target the correct system to realize carbon savings in an effective and economical manner. And the responsibility shouldn't rest on new construction only. It really has to include both existing and new construction. So we need to ensure compliance. It's important that our teams are well informed about the latest regulations and commitments related to carbon emissions. And over the past 2 decades, we have gained extensive knowledge on how to design, construct, and manage zero carbon buildings. At Stantec, we prioritize people, we uphold integrity, and we're driven by ambition to succeed. We all leave a footprint, but it's up to us to decide whether it's a negative or positive one. That's why I believe in creating a handprint, the positive impacts that we make in the world.
Well, thank you for taking the time to talk with us today, Ghina. I think your insights have really highlighted how important decarbonisation is in the fight against climate change and how our collective efforts are crucial in helping to achieve the goals needed to create a more sustainable world. Just want to say thank you once again for being part of the Stantec.io podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for listening. Future episodes will continue to explore how digital solutions are shaping our world. In the meantime, you can also visit our website at www.stantec.io for more information.